the question of this event is, where do we go from here? And some people have approached this from a very metaphysical aspect, and others have approached it from sort of a more sort of tangible element of actions we can take. I'd like to give a special nod to Alexander in the back there, and Ferro, who was with us yesterday, for offering people here real ways to start making a change, not just in their lives, but in the ways that they behave. My talk is called A World Without Authenticity. As universal and vague as that might sound, the world we currently inhabit is filled with abstractions. It's navigable by the adept and the young, fraught with peril that no longer kills you in most cases, but hobbles you. And it possesses systems that more often than not make us worse rather than bettering ourselves. We are in the midst of a mental health crisis. This is accepted widely by both the left and the right. And it's quite unlike any other. Sort of the last sort of big event, I would say, strikes me as the Great Depression of the 1930s. And the idea of comparing ourselves to then might seem silly at first glance. The conditions of the present world are unlike any other time in history. We might even consider this the softest time in recorded history, as AA is fond of saying, in the analogy of strong men creating good times creating weak men creating bad times, we're probably the weak men. We have access to medicine, technology, labor-saving devices, the internet, the greatest repository of knowledge, opinion, misinformation, podcasts and streams, and entertainment media that has ever existed. Coming fresh out of the Great War at the beginning of the... I should be using my presentation. That would probably help. Turning it on. Mental health crisis, yes. Medicine, technology, labor-saving devices, internet. There we go. Right. War. What is it good for? Coming fresh out of the Great War, the First World War, which killed 1 in 37 of the UK population, almost exclusively men as well. The Spanish flu killed a further 250,000. We refer to the 1920s, that followed this period, as the Roaring Twenties. And whether or not this is some a matter of some discussion, whether or not this was a coping mechanism for the losses that they had experienced, and whether or not this is the case, I don't think we'd describe where we currently are as the Roaring 2020s. I'm going to play you a short clip now, with this lovely graphic now, but from a chap called Dr. Sam Vaknin, just a 3-minute clip from the beginning of one of his talks, and then we'll go from there.
Good evening. The more observant of you may have noticed that I'm not my usual jovial, charming, and charismatic self. Something happened to Grandpa. Grandpa Dino is not as usual. What had happened? Well, first of all, I had to review literature about young people. People under the age of 35 and people under the age of 25, these two cohorts. I reviewed literature by Peggy Orenstein. I reviewed literature by Lisa Wade. I read the studies by Twench and Campbell. I read studies from Norway, from Portugal, from Brazil, from Nigeria, from Israel, from China, from the Middle East. Studies comprising altogether a few million people, actually. I had to read several books, as I'm preparing the curriculum, the syllabus, for next year's first semester, which would be youth psychology, the psychology of the young. I also corresponded with quite a few young people, many of them my students, others who are not my students, viewers from YouTube. I took on a few young clients, which I rarely do, And so I treated or worked with clients under the age of 35. And I began to obtain a bit of a panoramic view of what's happening to young people today.
That talk by Dr. Vaknin there, he's a psychologist who's personally lived through four marvelous technology, isn't it? Delightful. Is that working now? So it's not my laptop. So the Trumpton special. Okay. Whilst we get this back online, I'm going to continue. That was Dr. Sam Vaknin, a psychologist who personally lived through 4 world-altering wars. He's done considerable research on the attitudes and trials of young people. The talk he's going into there talks about the kind of loss of values, virtues, and emotions in young people. I do encourage you to seek it out and give it a listen after this talk. But I wanted to bring it up just to show the breadth of research that he's involved in, give him a bit of credibility. He's well read and perplexed by the mass depression which affects the young, by which he means under 35s, in the face of, by historical standards, a very mild pandemic. I think we can all agree. And also by their kind of robotic response to almost all aspects of life. And so this comes to my general definition of the state of particularly young people, and this does include people within our community. We are listless, a shadow of confidence, marred by uncertainty, and in general terms, we fall into 2 categories. Those who have disengaged completely with the system on every level. These are the people who get on with their daily lives, not in blissful ignorance, but in willful blindness. To the changes being made at the very top levels of society, it is a choice that is made either out of necessity, fear, or because it is the path of least resistance. Marvelous. Yes, this is that. I love this statement by... So, as I say, I recommend chatting this out. Bit blackpilling. So, person 1. Choice made out of necessity, fear, or because it's the path of least resistance. After all, these people reason, my vote means nothing, so why should I vote? My actions mean nothing, so why should I take action? Better to put on Netflix and tune out. I'm miserable. I can't quantify why, unable to escape an increasingly abstracted world and a slave to it in equal measure. On the other side, we have the politically engaged. Continually frustrated by a political climate that ignores local issues, obsessing over international or global crises that they either struggle to relate to, or which threaten such far-reaching consequences that they are kept in a constant stress state, wondering who will be the next target of the system or climate change or whatever it happens to be. One of the things we noted, of course, with the whole Greta Thunberg debacle was she is genuinely terrified. These people reason that perhaps there is no solution. Perhaps the overthrow of the system is the only way to create meaningful change. Thanks, Scrump, for laying that one out. My actions mean nothing, and I may be persecuted for it. My vote is for 2 faces of the same party, so why am I going to vote? I am miserable. I can list a dozen reasons why, but I can't seem to find a way through. At its heart, that is what I believe the reason for this event is. We're gathered here this weekend to wrestle with the question, where do we go from here? That's a big question. Perhaps the biggest question. I think we can all agree that we stand on a precipice, and we have for some time. And what awaits us in the abyss is as much a mystery as the moment we will leap into it, societally speaking. We know we call ourselves men amongst the ashes, and that sort of thing. But really, there are further depths. There are further depths we can fall to. My talk today is entitled Finding Authenticity in a World of Abstractions. I believe it is a positive endeavor, and one I hope you will find thought-provoking and engaging. It is also a call to action, one that I hope you will be inspired by and hope to take part in. So what do I mean by authentic? After all, authenticity is by its very nature subjective, surely? By authentic, I mean real. I mean physical, tangible. By authentic, I mean unsullied by curation or censorship, genuine. There are things our brains are evolutionarily suited for which involve interaction in the real world and things which are not. Let's take money for a first example. Cash, which before the advent of online banking, debit cards, and contactless payments, was the default method of being paid and paying for things. You might have your wage paid directly into a bank, but in order to use it, you had to withdraw it. You held in your hand the physical manifestation of value, the banknote or coin, a coin that used to be underpinned by a physical commodity in the form of gold. The more cynical might say, well, that banknote is a promissory note, an abstraction denoting the amount of gold the holder is in effect promised but never given. This is true, but it's a small abstraction. It's the changing of one physical commodity to another physical commodity. You're able to budget, spend, and check what funds you have available by looking in the wallet in your pocket. Compare that to today, where the manifestation of money is, for the vast majority of people in this country at least, an app on their phone, a phone which already fulfills hundreds of other functions for the sake of convenience and entertainment. The amount of money, not a number of bills or coins, merely a number, stored in binary memory, accessed through fingerprint or password recognition, and keeping that number up as all the game has become. How is the human mind meant to process the increase of value, to know it innately in themselves, without a physical manifestation to which we ascribe value? Think of it in terms of the experiment where you try and imagine 100 people in a room. We have 100 people in the room. Perhaps this is relatively easy to imagine. Perhaps, can you imagine 1,000? Can you imagine 10,000? How far can the human mind go? There is a reason that casinos use tokens over real money, so that you don't connect the spend at the casino with your real-world earnings, yet online casinos no longer have the need to do that. There is a reason the wealthy cease to ascribe any real value to their money when they have so much of it that they cannot comprehend what it even is anymore. We have created a system whereby we can pay for anything we can afford at the touch of a button, and absolutely no comprehension that the payment is taking place, psychologically speaking. This is an inauthentic system existing in a limbo where we exchange the immaterial for the material. The purpose of my talk, by the way, is not to say reject money. This is one example. It's not one that's going away. If anything, we are destined at this point to increasingly abstract methods of payment, at least where currency is concerned. Even the burgeoning growing pains of cryptocurrency push the limits of what most people are willing to deal with in terms of abstracting the fundamental mechanisms of exchange. I want us to take a little bit of a detour from the times we live in, down the path of history, to look at which abstractions have made their ways into our lives and in what frequency. Here we have the man of the 50s. He's seen war, likely survived it personally. The internet doesn't exist yet, but we are starting to see the mass adoption of things like the telephone, the television, the wireless has become the radio. He married young, has a strong sense of community. Through his Christian heritage, he helps out at his local farmer's market and hopes to one day purchase a house. The British Empire is in its full decline. Options for travel are sparse at this time, if he even wants to, after what has happened in Europe over his parents' and his grandparents' lifetimes. He has a clear, assigned role in society, as do his wife and children. His focus is very much localized, and his priorities are similarly national or local, small in scale. Here's the man of the 80s. The growth in power of the television has allowed access to wider experiences in entertainment and information, even more so than the radio before it. But to most people, the television is still a luxury. It's beginning to replace the newspaper as a source of information, but it's a supplementary abstraction. It doesn't impact too much what he does for fun, how he meets people, what he talks to them about, and so on. The pill and the sexual revolution of the 60s have, however, abstracted sex. Sex is no longer tied steadfastly to procreation, and this is reflected in the society around him, particularly in the music and entertainment industries. The man may well be holding on to the values of his parents and grandparents and society as a whole. He is still locally based, and it is only as the 80s draw to a close that the national curriculum is introduced, taking authenticity away from the local educational system and pushing a unified idea of what education is for the whole country. These are the two major abstractions from this era. Here we have the man of the noughties. The internet has blossomed from an information network to an avenue for all sorts of media. A television is now in every home, near enough, and is the primary source of information and entertainment. Sex is now fully abstracted, being distanced enough from people who lived before the pill was introduced. The eyes of this man have been turned from helping his local community to things that affect the country on a national and international scale. He is inundated with information on a national basis, stories that are being sought not because they are relevant to him and his local community, but designed to draw his attention away from such things. The newspaper may have discussed national issues before, but now he is learning about crimes and events all over the country from the television. The advent of home video gaming is now, and the late 90s, moving from a communal activity, say in the arcades, to one in relative isolation. There's a kind of community here, though it's abstracted, in the sense that everyone is still subject to the same information, even if it is national in scale. He feels compelled to act on national issues. We remember things like the march in London against the Iraq War, believing that due to his higher level of information, his voice might be heard. 9/11 has happened, leading to an abstracted war with no clear aims. Finally, we have the man of today. Yes, that's me in the middle. Online banking has replaced traditional currency. Sex is fully abstracted, and apps like Tinder dominate the space, reducing the quality of couplings and allowing for a hypergamous, location-free dating environment where a swipe left and a swipe right determine even the opportunity to date. Social media has replaced in-person interaction. He numbers his contacts in the local community in single digits, if he even has any at all. Information is now curated by abstract algorithms that have gamified almost every aspect of his life. Likes, ratios, wrecked feminist videos or internet blood sports, away from Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Perhaps it's matches on dating apps, the calories in his shopping basket, or the sessions on his Headspace app. Religion is also fully declined, no longer pulling people together, but merely an instrument for most often stories of abuses happening under its auspice. The stories about religion are the crimes of Islam, the permissiveness of the Church of England, and the abuses of tiny minorities in the Christian church to make it appear even comparable to Islamic abuses that are also hidden in the name of diversity. The food chain has also been entirely mechanized, and he has no idea where what arrives on his plate has really come from. The news he consumes is based on a chain of behaviors that reinforce his current worldview because that's what drives the most clicks. The connection between competence and achievement has largely been destroyed. This is evidenced in the devaluing of degrees, the replacement of achieved grades with teacher-based subjective assessments. The national curriculum has become a vector for a worldview that no longer seeks to educate, but indoctrinate. And the workplace has become a means of displaying empty gestures of virtue, where many people are afraid to discuss honest topics even in their off hours. I don't know if many of you have had the same experience as me, but many companies now mandate that if you use social media at all and badmouth the company, even if you've had a bad shift, this could be a means for your dismissal. It's not all bad, of course, but I hope you can see the way that the layers of abstractions have built up over time. This is a talk about positive vision. And I am describing these periods in this way because it's clear to me that our relative societal inexperience with these tools has allowed all of the ways we had adapted to derive a meaningful experience to abstract. Underneath these manipulations, we can unpick the fabric of the rot. We can reclaim a meaningful existence. We can find that authenticity again, and I do believe that. In Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis, just to take a completely different tact, the main character, a man named Gregor, looks after his family as the sole breadwinner. His relationship is strained with his family, and his mother badmouths him behind his back. He wakes one morning to discover he has become a monstrous insect, and over the course of the story he is assisted in living by his sister Greta, who does her best to ease his distress at the state he is transformed into. In the end, she comes to resent him, as do the rest of his family. There have been many attempts to try to understand the nature of the story. Kafka is obviously a good writer, and he's stood the test of time. The interpretation that I think holds the most weight and the most relevance for us today is that even before Gregor becomes the verminous beast, he is already reduced to the status of an insect. He is resented by his family not because of what he has become physically just, but because of what he has become reduced to from a man to an insect, psychologically speaking. He has become purely utilitarian means of obtaining funds to live, with no other emotion or value in his being. He is the creature of a functionalistic professional life, the bugman. This is, in some sense, what I believe has happened to us. The wider us, I mean. Many of the abstractions that we call conveniences are there to save labor. As we reduce the amount of general labor in our lives, we reduce our utility to one another. This is not a value statement. I'm not judging you. I don't want to be washing my clothes in a tub every morning or making a fire to cook on every night. But it is a statement of fact that whenever we reduce the need for dependence on one another in the real world, we reduce our value to one another. A friend is not just someone who goes to the pub with you or hangs out and plays video games. A friend is someone who helps you when you want to put on a birthday party for your daughter. It's someone who helps you build that greenhouse in the garden so you could grow tomatoes. It's someone you can help in times of difficulty with things as simple as cooking a meal or being an ear to listen. People are often unwilling to accept that they have become a Gregor in many cases. Many have no appreciable skills outside of their education, and yet we are told we are special. Everyone is special. Everyone is unique. Everyone can express themselves however they wish. It is, of course, a lie, as we know. Every space is now becoming increasingly curated, moderated, reduced. People cling to online communities as the only refuge from both the inactivity and the boredom of their lives. However, at this time, we are not precluded from staying ahead of this curve. Again, this is a talk. It's a positive talk. I promise. We are able to make changes that will result in not just the better lives for ourselves, but also for those around us and set a good example for our children. So I've spent the last 20 minutes or so laying out a very dreary window into how we currently live our lives. So I think it's time I started answering the question of where do we go from here, don't you think? In short, we must recognize that in order for any meaningful change to begin, it must start with ourselves. On the individual level, that means. It means a change in our attitudes, habits, and a change in how we approach others who have not made the change. Whereas AA has proposed his Trumpton example, a county, in effect, judging by the size, about 35,000 people, in effect free from the tools that have precipitated the decline of our civilization, I am instead proposing what might be considered the outreach arm of our movement. Seeing as all of you have come here, I am presuming that there is a kind of fire in you to answer the question of where we go from here. I am assuming that there is a desire in you two, having answered at least part of that question, to engage more meaningfully than you currently are. And I'm going to do my utmost to lay it out clearly and positively. The tools that have been given us, particularly the internet, have allowed us as a community to form in the first place. You might argue that we wouldn't have needed to form if not for it. However, the internet exists, we exist, we must make the best of what we've been given. And it remains a fact that the internet is a fertile source of new community members and people who are searching for something beyond the abstract. People come to the YouTube channels, they read the books of the speakers here because they recognize we are trying and doing our damnedest to speak truth to the world. Ooh, that's getting ahead of myself. Truth, it is unhappy to hear for the most part, but a truth that must be spoken. Some time ago, we set up Basketweavers United, a meme initially that was spawned from an episode of Unpopular Opinions that we should get together locally, get to know the people in our area, and to just have fun. The idea grew, and at one point we were mapping potential chapters all over the world. COVID kind of put an end to that for the time being, but it got me thinking, what could we be if we pushed this idea again, free from the COVID troubles? Free from the shackles of COVID restriction. Basketweavers and the idea it upholds is a commitment to meaningful local connections, promoting healthy and positive values. It has the scope to heal the longing that we have for real human connections and takes away the fear of reprisal for expressing ourselves. That's a lot. But bear with me. Meeting in person as we are today, will do more for you, will do more for us than 100 online Discord sessions. It will do more for your thinking, for your social interaction than listening alone to a dozen podcasts. Whilst things like the internet, instant banking, and the flow of information aren't going anywhere, we can. We can take it upon ourselves to detach ourselves from the abstract as a means of living and place that burden where it should always have rested, on people, not Twitter, not Discord, not YouTube videos. All of these things will still exist, but they're merely tools. They're supplementary. You don't listen to an episode of Sargon or me or AA talking about something just to have it out with some internet leftist without a face, hoping to convince them. No, you currently draw the ideas out of these shows and discuss them in our chat rooms. I'm proposing simply that we move that offline, that we place ourselves that if we are overheard, we garner interest from individuals. I'm proposing that we do this in a setting not fueled by a hatred of what many have become, what our society has become, what our society has mandated, but in a setting of wholesome interaction in the real world. There is very little catharsis in mere discussion, but even if it is a necessary part of forming your own perspectives, and I do encourage you to form your own perspectives. Basketweavers is not here merely to manipulate you in a different or new direction. It's here because it's honest. It's here because you can have fun, you can hike, you can drink, you can learn a new skill, you can find new friends, and because it is a network of like-minded people, it is going to remove the stress that I know many of you feel every day that the world is bearing down on you. I want the Basketweavers to succeed because it fosters honesty, because it fosters community, because it is a way to engage people who are crying out for the virtues that we have lost. When I was preparing this talk, I put out feelers on Twitter and Discord and all the rest, and I was surprised, although not totally, to discover that many people within our sphere have attempted to adopt a value-free analysis of what's going on, not just because they are interested in the search for truth, but because they have given up on almost every other value. I've been told, love isn't real. How can I be honest when I cannot trust anyone else to be honest with me? And even if they are honest, the postmodern conception that there is no truth but your personal truth has also infected members of our community. Compassion is almost entirely lacking. We're incredibly cynical. And the recognition that all of us are on a journey with shifting patterns of thought and looking for a way to give meaning to ourselves seems absent. I propose that the Basketweavers become a vector for virtues rather than as a means to complain. I truly believe we can build people up, that we can instill a real sense of authentic community, and that this network has almost infinite capability to grow what Pharaoh might call scalability. In some sense, I might liken this to couch surfing. If I can get past the slide that I should have put up earlier. Goodness me. I might liken this to, I can't see the extra slides coming up, I feel bad. Yeah, I see. Sorry. I might liken this to couch surfing. This is a website that has built a massive network of travelers who host, or did before COVID at least, hosted guests in their country for free, or in exchange for what is essentially favours, be that cooking, language lessons, music, or even just the promise of a spare bed when the host wants to travel in a guest's country. I want Basketweavers to become a network where wherever you go in the country, possibly abroad as well, that you can have access to a group, however small, of people that you could meet up with, enjoy time with, and be honest with, people to laugh with. I want Basketweavers members to be engaging in long-term thinking, long-term plans together, whether that be fitness-related, maybe completing a challenge like climbing a mountain, or Tough Mudder, or bringing new skills to the table, fieldcraft, basket weaving itself if you wanted, and also doing positive things that we enjoy that have no real end goal. I want Basketweavers to encourage one another, to be able to come and help out and support one another, and to coach each other in the ways that we are lacking. The nice thing is, all this costs is the time and effort that we are currently investing in online shouting matches, pointless ratios, bemoaning the state of our country and of the world. In return, you get to make your local world tangibly better. You will be fitter and healthier. You'll be more socially engaged. You'll be less stressed, confident in engaging with people outside the community, which is important, and trying to bring people in. We must be the example of the better men to our peers, children, and to women. People will see that you are not just doing good, but feeling good. You can be a better friend to your existing friends. You'll be a better lover, have better working relationships. Nothing is precluding you from going into business with a fellow basket weaver once that is established, and a real-world network is going to be of infinitely more value to your soul than the facade of a community online, which is, whilst valuable, a mere abstraction compared to the value you can extract from the authentic face-to-face. Many people at this event have told me that it is a fundamentally different experience to be talking in person. As I've mentioned, we are in the middle of a terrible mental health crisis, one of our own making, and the solution, all we need is the willingness to push the button, to have a few standout members of our community engage in this enterprise together, to build momentum, to build a better space that they can never take from us. Even if they blacklist you from the internet, even if you lose your Twitter feed, even if, God forbid, they shut off internet banking, you will have friends just down the road, people to rely on, a form of extended family. There's a reason I've chosen this event to say this piece and not, say, released a video on YouTube. In many ways, this talk is a touch point for people who have already shown themselves to be willing to put money where their mouth is and pay for this event, which has been fantastic, but also who are willing to step out of their home and to meet one another. These people who you may only know from online, look around you. These are not just attendees at the same event. These are your colleagues, now and in future, to help create the positive and meaningfully authentic experiences that I crave, and that I hope you crave, and I hope we can build together going forward. Consider why our enemies are so successful, especially with the youth. They have an entire world of NGOs and government programs to draw their engagement and to drive them to action. Why does the young man of today, seeing no meaning in his own life, feel compelled to join a charity program and build a school in Africa? The left might scream, white savior complex. But we know it is so much more to do with the craving in his soul for a chance to make a difference in someone's life. Over time, this drive is driven out of us. It's lost with the abstractions that permeate our lives, and we cannot lose hope to make a difference in the lives of those around us who are still positive. We must start with ourselves, and make no mistake, this is not a short-term project. I wouldn't even call it a long-term project, because if all goes well, there won't be a term. This is going to take years to implement, but the experiences we will have along the way, if we want it enough, will make it worth every step. Thus, we must present ourselves well, not just to our own, but also to others. It must be a sincere presentation of our values, not a jeering mob like the Extinction Rebellion protests going on in London at the moment. Our qualities that stand front and centre must epitomise not just honesty and truth, but compassion and understanding. By being honest with one another, we create trust. By being compassionate, we increase the chance of people confiding in us, of using that trust, of adding value to it. By being understanding, we can guide people to things, to resources that other members of our community have built. Take, for example, the idea of the Twitter leftist who comes at you on Twitter over the border in America. It's a bit of a pointless conversation. He's never lived anywhere near there, and he's not going to listen to you anyway. Now take your group who meets up for a hike every Sunday afternoon. One of the members has brought along a brother or a cousin or simply a friend from work. The person is going to be much more amenable to listening to what we have to say. It doesn't even have to be someone we know. It might be that you run into someone randomly, another group of walkers, and just get chatting. What you talk about is largely tangential, but it will humanize you to them, and it will humanize them to you. It will give them something to think about, and probably you as well. It will also bring your mindset more in line with localization than any amount of international politics discussion with someone in another country. It will help members of our community to find girlfriends and wives in their local area that they would never have got the opportunity to meet. Women who will, over time, grow our ranks and help educate our children and provide more avenues to grow. It sounds trite. I'm making it sound scientific, matter of fact. I'm taking the emotion out of it. But it's not, of course. But it is only by putting ourselves in those situations where we might grow that we will. Let's go back to that slide on the man of today. Handsome man. This is one of the ways in which we remove the abstraction from sex. Looking at the others, money. This abstraction is reduced when the reasons you use it are replaced by favors for friends. Spending time together, building those meaningful reasons to use it. If you're cooking for others, then you're not using it on frivolous things, ordering lots of takeaway, not to mention, it's just cheaper to cook in general. If you're building things with others, you're not wasting your time being abstracted by social media. If you're building a local focus, you're not losing yourself in the global abstraction. If we're teaching one another meaningful skills, we reduce the impact of an abstracted education. Hell, if we get large enough, we may even open a school. This seems, the academic agency already exists. It's getting proposed courses all the time. Who knows where that could go? I'm not saying this will replace religion. But I know there are many Christians in our community of all different stripes. People who I know are sick to death of unchristian churches and pause in their preachers. They can find meaningful and useful religious study in our community. All of this. And it's fun. One of the great lies of the left is its insistence that it is compassionate. All too often, they forget that pity is not compassion, that their pride in themselves is their source of their feelings of shame when witnessing someone they consider to be worse off. I'm not going to wax lyrical about their entire argument. I don't have time for that, and this talk isn't about that. This talk is a call to action, an attempt to help you, to help me, to help us, standing there, sitting there, realize that you have a role to play in a trying time that extends far beyond internet debate, memes, ratios, and dunks. I would hope that by wit of you being here today, that you want this as much as I do. Look to yourself, look to the people beside you, and consider where you want to be. Perhaps my vision of what Basketweavers or something like it has inspired you to sign up to help build something together. Perhaps it's not, and I'm off track. This is not what this community wants. But I wanted to bring you a talk from the heart, and I feel that's what I've delivered. I want to end on a bit of a personal tangent. When I was 15, I set up a youth club for disadvantaged kids on my local council estate. Nothing large, partly funded by a small local church. It was staffed initially by me, my dad, and one other volunteer. I remember coming in one day and one of the kids said, "Why are you trying to help us? We're the bad kids." I was shocked, and all I could really say was, because you're here and we want to give you a place to have fun. These sorts of comments happened almost every week for 5 years. And after that time, they stopped. Not just because we had become a fixture of the community, not going anywhere, it was also because the kids we raised in that environment... Yeah, no problem. It was also because the kids we raised in that environment one night a week, every week we could, valued that place and loved coming. We turned several from knife crime, several from drugs, encouraged another to pursue his love of modelling, despite his peers telling him it was a stupid thing to do. He now works for a small manufacturer making models. It wasn't just the kids we helped as well, it was the parents who would often come to collect their children and talk to us about what they were struggling with, asked what advice we could give, and thanking us for giving them an evening's peace. We were able to serve 25 kids with a further 35 to 40 on a waiting list, and we were recommended by the police in the end. And here's some of them now. I'm not saying all this to big myself up as a saviour of the council estate where I grew up. I'm saying that with time, considerable effort, consistency, and also just by doing something fun for the people around you, there can be incredible growth, community engagement, and stories that you wouldn't otherwise have had. I think Basketweavers has the potential for that growth. I think that no matter how hostile the world may be around us, if we comport ourselves with dignity, if we demonstrate our humility, our compassion, courage, and heart, if we can do those things, we can make it happen. It takes vision, and most importantly, time to achieve what we want to do. I am thinking in terms of decades and not in terms of months. But I do believe it is the best step forward. Thank you very much.